Hello, and welcome back to Prism and Company. My name is Colin, and on the docket today, another entry in my series on the 7, nailed it that time, principles of art. The principle of the day is... balance. What is balance, I hear you asking, or actually probably not, because I think most of us have a good grip on what balance is. Balance is one of those interesting design principles, or art principles, I should say, that exists both visually and physically. You can literally balance something. Imagine two scales and they're evenly weighted with objects. You can balance on one foot. We all kind of understand that balance is finding a middle ground and making sure that things are even on both sides, or many sides. What we're talking about today, though, is specifically visual balance, and that comes in two different flavors, symmetrical and asymmetrical, at least for the purposes of our discussion today. We're going to take a look at 3 different cards and see how they embrace balance. Let's get right to it. First up, we have the 6 of Coins from the Marguerite Peterson Tarot, and boy, oh boy, am I just swoony as all get out for this deck lately. It's smeary, it's abstract, it's deep, it's textural, it's beautiful, and you'll probably see it show up a few times in this series because, oh my gosh, does it embrace a lot of really beautiful fine art principles. But balance is what we're here for today. And here we can see nearly symmetrical balance. There are definitely differences on both sides, but it's almost as if we have a handprint and a footprint over here, and someone has slid a mirror up and we're just seeing the reflection from one side to the other. Now, obviously it's not perfect. This foot is slightly smaller. We have a halo of light around the foot on the left. This hand and this hand, the colors are essentially inverted. So the palm is bright, the palm is dark. The top of the hand is bright, the top of the hand is dark. There are some, but it's difficult to find a perfectly symmetrical image in tarot because people like to embrace the asymmetry a little bit to freshen up the design and add more visual appeal. Perfect symmetry is very satisfying and perfectly balanced, but often leaves an image looking very static, where if you break your imagery a little bit with some asymmetry or things not being quite symmetrical but still even, it lends a certain momentum to the piece. It lends some visual interest. It lets the eye bounce back and forth. However, in a more symmetrical image like this, one where your eye can kind of be lulled into place, you get a very stabilized image. And that's reinforced by the imagery here. I imagine somebody planting their feet, bending over and planting their palms. That's a very stable pose as well. Although if I did this, I could do it once because I can like barely touch my toes and I never come back up. So that's stable in a way that's never coming up again. So either way, I digress. I think the image itself, though, beautifully represents what balance can do. It can reinforce the meaning of a card by saying, let's make a nice stable image right here, or be in a nice stable place. And then the eye can also feel nice and stable as they look. Let's take a look at some asymmetry. Get it out of my system. Here we have the Lovers from the Masonic Tarot. All of the decks in this video I'm actually kind of swooning over lately. This one's really been catching my eye. And here we have a beautiful rendition of asymmetry. So what exactly do I mean by asymmetry? Asymmetry is a composition that is balanced, but is not quite symmetrical. And we can see that in several ways. We have a shape that is ultimately symmetrical. It is, as if someone put a mirror there and it's reflecting side to side, but you can see the color is quite different. We have dark, deep, rich blues on one side, fiery, warm oranges and yellows on the other. Then we have 2 figures on the inside, nearly symmetrical, but not quite. This figure's arm is wrapped across the chest, and this figure's arm is reaching out to the side. And what I think is the most interesting are these 2 gals. We have this figure draped across the side, reaching down, kind of pushing out. This figure straight and stoic, pointing up and in. It's as if the composition is almost swirling. So we're adding a new axis, if you will, to our symmetry. In the last image, it was symmetrical up and down. The hands were not symmetrical with the feet. We don't have another mirror right here. We only have the one mirror in the center. This one, it's almost as if we have a mirror here and a mirror kind of on its side, and we can see the upwards of this hand and the downwards of this hand balancing each other out. So it's a more complicated symmetry. It's not as easy as just one plane or one axis of reflection, but ultimately it does balance itself out. Similar things kind of happen with the sun and the moon here. We have a larger, denser moon that is kind of filling more visual space. We have a smaller, more ephemeral sun. It's filling visual space, but in a very different way, very kind of wispy way, where the moon is dense, the sun is very effervescent. And then finally, we have our internal figures reinforcing the things that their external figures are doing, but in the opposite way. This figure is reaching in and up. This figure is reaching out. So we have balance on this side between these two figures. The same thing is happening here. This figure is reaching in. This figure is pointing down. And both of them are pointing the opposite way, just like both of these are pointing the opposite ways too. So we have figures pointing out. We have figures pointing in. We have figures going up and down. We have figures looking at each other. We have colors that are balanced. We have several axes of reflection. It's a very complex image that looks very simple when you're just kind of taking it in. And that to me is the sign of good balance. It is taking lots of disparate pieces and making them feel the same on either side. And what a great way to look at the Lovers card as well. Let's take a look at one more example of a very symmetrical and also asymmetrical image. We're kind of blending both here in the Two of Wind from the lovely Tarot of the Spirit. Another deck that is just like full of this beautiful, very rich artistic detail. Now here we have both very symmetrical and very asymmetrical pieces at work. Our swords in the center, along with this circle, extremely symmetrical. There are very, very, very slight differences. A minor blue hilt on the sword as opposed to the minor yellow, but the blades are essentially just, cut and paste to the side. And I say that with all due respect. I think it's beautifully done. Our circle in the background is basically just, reflected across. It's essentially a perfect circle. The swords are even leaving the edge of the composition in the same way, and their blades are reaching the same point away from the edge of the canvas. But in the background, we have all of this flora just flourishing and exploding. The colors and the movement of it are swirling. But in some ways, it's very balanced. Very much like the Lovers card. Let's actually bring this back in for a second. If we take our Lovers card and turn it on its side, you can see on this side, the top, we have bright oranges and yellows. And on this side, we have dark blues. It's taking the same idea of kind of an element of the composition being rotated and still retaining balance. So even though there's a lot going on this card, there's lots of things flickering in the background, our ideas, our swords are crossing and stabilizing. Again, we're kind of using the visual information in the card to help reinforce the reading and just kind of appreciate what's going on behind the scenes. Let's take a look at everything we looked at with balance. So with balance, things came down to two principles. We have symmetrical balance, where things are even on both sides. And we haven't looked at a perfectly symmetrical image in tarot because not a ton of them exist. And honestly, they're not always the most interesting thing. So here we have a pretty darn symmetrical image, and then here an image that is symmetrical and also asymmetrical. And then asymmetry in all of its glory, where the image itself is balanced, but things are quite different on each side. The pieces are just equal but different. Symmetry or balance in a piece really leads to an element of stability in some way. It helps lock you into an image and keep things from going crazy. Sometimes you want an image to push you off the edge of the page. You want it to feel intense or aggressive. But sometimes you want to feel safe in an image. You want to feel balanced. You want to feel even-keeled. It's important to have both, especially in a tarot deck, because a tarot deck is encompassing a lot of different ideas. I hope you all find excellent ways to look for balance and use them in your readings. And I cannot wait to tell you more about the 7 principles of art with tarot. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.